Internet rights advocate John Perry Barlow dies, by Sarah Ashley O'Brien. February 7, 2018, 7:17 p.m. Eastern Time. Early Internet rights advocate John Perry Barlow died on Wednesday, colleagues said. He was 70 years old. Barlow was co-founder of the Electronic Frontier Foundation, a nonprofit that advocates for civil liberties in the digital age. Barlow started the organization with Mitch, Kapor and John Gilmore in 1990. He remained on the organization's board and involved with F until his death. It is no exaggeration to say that major parts of the Internet we all know and love today exist and thrive because of Barlow's vision and leadership, reads an obituary by EFF's executive director, Cindy Cohn, who worked with Barlow for 27 years. He always saw the Internet as a fundamental place of freedom, where voices long silenced can find an audience and people can connect with others regardless of physical distance. Barlow was a co-founder, with legendary whistleblower Daniel Ellsberg, of the Freedom of the Press Foundation, a free speech nonprofit started in 2012. Rest in power, Barlow. The Internet will never be the same without you, the organization tweeted after the news broke. As word of his death spread, the tributes poured in on social media. Barlow was also a lyricist for the Grateful Dead, helping write such songs as Mexicali Blues. He was also a rancher. Barlow saw the Internet's potential as a world that all may enter without privilege or prejudice accorded by race, economic power, military force, or station of birth, a world where anyone, anywhere may express his or her beliefs, no matter how singular, without fear of being coerced into silence or conformity. Cohn said the Electronic Frontier Foundation, which champions user privacy, free expression, and innovation, will write more about Barlow's legacy in coming days and weeks. And as always, we will continue the work to fulfill his dream, she wrote. Media. Barlow was also a lyricist for the Grateful Dead, helping write such songs as Mexicali Blues. He was also a rancher. Barlow saw the Internet's potential as a world that all may enter without privilege or prejudice accorded by race, economic power, military force, or station of birth, a world where anyone, anywhere may express his or her beliefs, no matter how singular, without fear of being coerced into silence or conformity. Cohn said the Electronic Frontier Foundation, which champions user privacy, free expression, and innovation, will write more about Barlow's legacy in coming days and weeks. And as always, we will continue the work to fulfill his dream, she wrote. Foundation, which champions user privacy, free expression, and innovation, will write more about Barlow's legacy in coming days and weeks. And as always, we will continue the work to fulfill his dream, she wrote. The work to fulfill his dream, she wrote.
Expansive social space that every human being on the planet would be in at some point. We would all be there together simultaneously. And it resonated with me for another reason, because I'd been a big fan in college of the works of a French theologian named Teilhard de Chardin, who had written in the 30s, I believe, and wasn't published until the 50s. A set of he was an evolutionary theorist and a paleontologist and a Jesuit priest and a number of things, and he'd written this notion that evolution had this teleological thrust, where things were getting more and more advanced and complex and sophisticated, which, you know, it seems somewhat evident. I mean, if you compare us to single-cell organisms. But his idea was that very shortly the evolutionary process would take leave of physical matter and become a thing that was evolving out of thought itself. And that we would have the next layer of evolution be something he called the noosphere, N-O-O. And that would be made out of thought and consciousness. And I had been very intrigued by that notion. It felt right to me. And when I saw the internet, I thought, ha! Here we are. This is the nervous system of the collective organism of mind, already underway in its development. And I decided that almost immediately that this was something that I wanted to facilitate in any way that could be open to me, because it just seemed like the great work that humanity was about to embark on, or already had embarked on. And at that point, I don't suppose there were 200,000 people in the world with an email address. But it had already been going on for a while. I mean, the internet had been in existence since 1969, and this was 85, so it wasn't like a brand new thing, but it was, I would say it was new enough so that I was the only cattle rancher on it. Just about everybody on it was coming from a completely different angle, which enabled me to perceive things about it that I think were a little harder for some of the folks that were using it at that point to see, since a lot of them were still just trying to get a packet to go from A to B and trying to figure out why it wouldn't a lot of the time, and dealing with the technical issues and not fully perceiving just how huge this was. I mean, I felt then, and I continue to feel and have taken a certain measure of crap for saying that this is the most important technological event in the history of humanity since the capture of fire. And you could really say that it's been going on for longer than people think it has. I mean, I would mark the beginning of this, whatever we call this, the internet, to be that point, and I think it was 1837 when Samuel F.B. Morse tapped out "What Hath God Wrought" in Washington, D.C., and someone read it simultaneously in Baltimore. As soon as you could communicate instantaneously at a distance like that, then everything changed, and changes more and more all the time. But that was what got me interested in it to begin with, and you know, I didn't. For a long time, I didn't know what it was that I was going to be able to do that would be useful outside of learn everything I possibly could about it, how it worked, and what was going on it, and that kind of thing. But I did depart the cattle business in 1988 and was looking around for what I wanted to do next, and I thought that the most important thing that I could do would be to start thinking and writing about the internet in terms of the social and political and economic and philosophical and even religious aspects of what this might do in the world, because I could easily imagine it changing everything. I mean, I could easily imagine it causing there to be a fundamental renegotiation of all the existing power relationships on the planet in a relatively short time. And nobody seemed to be writing or talking about that, and so even though I didn't have any credentials to speak of, I thought, well, I can probably know as much about this as the next guy pretty quickly. And I got to know the people who had been working on it, spent a lot of time around them, really appreciating how blessed we had been with the quality of those people who actually were very aware in many cases of what it was that they were doing. And maybe they weren't writing about it necessarily, but they were certainly thinking about it.